Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the comic shop. It's BZ Comics. And this one, we're going to be going more of a tutorial route. So instead of showing you a 3D print, I'm actually going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how I do what I do. So in this one, I'm going to be showing you some tools that you should definitely have in your arsenal to make this journey a lot easier. This whole process is a journey. I mean, look at one of my first prints. So it just goes to show that it takes time to get here, but here are some steps that you can take to cut that path. Let's get to it. The first tool I promise you is going to be the most expensive. It's going to be these snips that cost you exactly the same amount that your printer costs because it actually comes with your printer. So this is a great tool to use in many different applications. One application to use this with or for is to remove your supports. Now I use this to cut off supports. I use this to cut off some of the raft. Kind of just helps just getting in there and snapping everything, making life a lot easier for you, so that way you don't have to like do it by hand. So just like that. These are pretty good. Like I said, they come with the printer, so you don't have to pay anything for these. But when I'm coming close to my actual print and I don't want to rip something off, what I'll do is like that. You see that it started to come apart a little. So instead of that happening, I just pretty much cut around the prop with these to prevent any cracks or breaks or anything like that. Now, cracks and breaks, it's not the biggest deal to me because as you see on this channel, pretty much everything I assemble, I use my soldering iron. So to fix this is pretty simple. We'll get more into the soldering iron in a little bit. So this can be a little pricey as far as like maintaining everything because you do have to buy more supplies as the time goes on, especially sandpaper. I'm probably keeping 3M in business because I have to buy a lot of this stuff. But I've tried finding different uses. I've tried finding different ways to pretty much recycle my sandpaper so that way I can get longer uses out of them. So a good thing to notice or a good thing to have is dry sandpaper and then wet and dry sandpaper. Now, in my earlier video, how to sand 3D prints, check that out here. I actually wasn't using this stuff, and once I started using this stuff, I never turned back because it makes the difference. As far as dry sandpaper, what I try to stay with is anywhere from 800, 120, 180 up to 220. I feel like 220 is like the best that you're gonna get as far as dry sanding. Now there are different tools that you can use in this process, which I'll get into in just a second. But as far as wet and dry sandpaper, I start off at 400 to 800, as you see here, and then go all the way up to 1,000. That's about the max that you can go to. What I notice sometimes is when you're using wet and dry sandpaper is that sometimes this stuff gets really slick or it makes your print really slick. So it can make the primer or the paints that you're putting onto your print can make it a little bit more challenging for it to stick the higher you go. So I stay within 400 to 800 on those two. So just a recap, anywhere from 80 to 220. 80 grit sandpaper, I'm telling you, that is like the go-to for starting. That's like, it goes hand in hand with 3D printing, I feel like, because when I use that 80 grit sandpaper, it just knocks out all of the layer lines, all of the patches, so on and so forth. That stuff is like, they made 80 grit sandpaper for 3D printing, just to give you like an example. But I'll go 80 grit, prime it, 120 grit, prime it, 180, 220, so on and so forth, all depending on how the prop looks. Obviously after 80 I'm gonna have to do something, but if it looks good after 80 and I prime it, then I'll go 80 straight to this 220, prime it, and then wet and dry sandpaper. This is usually when I use my Bondo or my spot putty. This is the time when I'm gonna start to use this. So now class, let's go ahead and look at this preview here of the difference of sanding, just to give you like a visual example of how I use my sandpaper and what the difference looks like between wet and dry. Or wet, then dry, dry, you get what I mean. So this is a perfect example because this is actually a print that I redid. So with it, I had to strip all of the paint down and then go from there. So with this one, I use a lot of 60 grit along the face mask because as you've seen under the eyes, it looked terrible. But to strip off the paint, I use the 80 grit sandpaper. So the main thing that you want to focus on is how bad are those layer lines looking? How bad is that print looking? If it's looking really bad, then obviously 60 grit or a higher sandpaper. As you get better, closer to this is where I'm going to start to wet and dry, start to use more of that 220, start to use more Bondo, and some more of the other things like that. Welcome back. Just messing with you guys, but to help you with sanding, there are a lot of different tools that you can use that are going to help you out with that. So like one thing that I kind of figured out is like a nail file. Mind blowing, like small little things that you have around your house. So a nail file is sandpaper. It's something that you can use like in smaller spaces. Like if I'm using a helmet with eyes, such as this Princess Shuri helmet. So if I want to sand within the eyes, pretty much get in here, then I'm going to use that nail filer to pretty much help out and make it easier, because getting like a sanding block or a palm sander in a small place like that is probably just not going to happen. There are also different files that you can find on Thingiverse. If you type in sanders, they have like a plethora, like a long list of different size filers that you can print out, just like a sanding block, where you can cut your sandpaper down to fit that exact size and then get it in there. So of course, the next thing, which was my favorite for a long time, was the sanding block. This sanding block works magic. Pretty much the Princess Shuri helmet that I just showed you, or the Black Panther helmet that I did, check both of those out here. Those files have a lot of detail. So something like this palm sander, I would not use at all, because that's just gonna grind it all away and pretty much make everything disappear. So in my upcoming video, if you can hear my printer, I'm 3D printing Kratos's Blades of Chaos. So those have a lot of detail, and I'm especially gonna be making some lights come through there to make it transparent. So with that detail, this is something that I'm not gonna be using, which means tons of work of this. So this is a good exercise. It's good with getting in those spots that you need to get into without taking out a lot of the detail. And again, here goes just a quick video of showing you how I use that palm sander and the sanding block to make my life easier. Palm sander is pretty straightforward. The main thing that you want to do, or main thing that you don't want to do, is go too hard with it to either crack the print or lose any of the detail. Other than that, it's just like sanding but with the machine. Did you miss me? Good. Okay, so just like how you've seen with this file here, as you can see that little crack that's in there. Focus, focus. Technical difficulties. So you see this little crack here. So I'm gonna get into a tool that can help patch this or put this together. But to hide this so that way that you don't see exactly that, two beautiful techniques that you can use. One is going to be a Bondo solution. Focus. There we go. So Bondo is what I use for like the bigger spots, bigger layer lines, bigger layer shifts. If I have a big section that I have to cover, it's going to be this. Now, one thing that you should know is that you don't just get Bondo. It comes with a hardener. So I've seen some people in some comments say that they got just the Bondo and they smeared this all over their print and tried to sand it and it didn't harden. You kind of need the activator. So most Bondos do come with this, but like some of the bigger tubes or bigger cases I have noticed don't. So always make sure, ask the cashier, ask somebody, hey, does the hardener come with it? If not, find out where you can find it. But this section, I got this at AutoZone, pretty much comes together. And you don't need a lot of this. This is why they give you like a small little tube, because you need some of this and just like a small pea size of this. It comes in either blue or red. This one's blue. And once you use the Bondo's gray. This is blue. You can tell that it's ready to go because it'll all be blue. Now you have to move with the speed of light, because this stuff dries and hardens fast, which is what I like. Because one of the other methods that I used to use was wood filler. Wood filler kind of gets clumpy, takes hours to dry, and as a final product, I don't really like the way that it looks because, like I said, it comes out real clumpy after you use it. But wood filler is something else that you can use if you don't want the fumes that Bondo is going to give you. Next up is spot putty. Now, as you know, in my Blue Beetle helmet, if you haven't seen that one, check that out here. But I use this to pretty much patch up the eyes, do a lot of small patchwork. So anything that's small, so after I use the Bondo, sand everything down, anything after that is when I'm going to use this stuff. Micro spots you want to use this on. If you're trying to cover something big, it's not really going to work as good or as it's intended. This is kind of more so towards like the smaller nicks, knacks, patty wax that you got going on. So Bondo first, wood filler first, and then come up after with this. What do you think's coming up next? I'm somebody who learns visually, so I'm always going to give you guys something to see. That way it helps you out through your process. So let's go. This is just a quick before shot. I was just mentioning the different layer lines that you can see in here and pretty much how I was going to go ahead and attack those. All right, guys, so I finally got my hands on some. The stores around my area have been out for a little while, but luckily AutoZone was in stock, so I grabbed some spot putty to help me out with these smaller spots. And I just re-upped on some more Bondo as well. So let's go ahead and patch this up and add the next layer of primer. This is the during stage. Like I said, one good thing about the Bondo and spot putty is how quickly they dry and how good they feel. Let me tell you guys something. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you. I don't know if you guys have seen that TikTok, but if you know, you know. But that spot putty, oh my goodness. If Bondo didn't get into like the big gaps and holes, I would honestly just stick with the spot putty because look at that. Everything came out perfect because of it. Like even the smaller layer lines I was able to get into, like look at that. Everything came out smooth. So after this, now I'm just going to do one more coat of primer. The faceplate, everything. Even on the line. Okay, so once you sanded everything, once you primed everything, you're probably going to want to start to attach some things just like a puzzle. Don't do anything like this. As you can see, this looks terrible. But glue is one thing that you can use. Glue is actually what I used on this Laughing Bat helmet. Now, not to assemble it, but to pretty much connect these spikes onto the helmet. So there are different applications when I will use glue. One glue that I found works superbly well is this E600. This is like super glue, had a baby with Gorilla Glue, and this is the offspring pretty much of the two. This stuff works great. It's very quickly adhesive. Some people use a hot glue gun. I'm not really into that because you have to buy the gun and you have to buy multiple of those like hot glue, like the glue sticks, everything like that, and you might still have it fail. This stuff works. I'm telling you, this stuff is going to get the job done. The reason I don't use glue is because with either holding a prop or like keeping a prop in a certain place, or if you're going to be wearing a prop, I feel like sometimes if it's out in the sun or anything like that, if it's a display, if it's under a lot of lights, that heat will start to pretty much reactivate the glue and make it a liquid again and mess everything up. So that's one of the big reasons why I don't really like to use glue other than for like small attachment pieces. Magnets. Of course you can use magnets. Some of the files that I use that I get from DO3D, which I'm pretty much making a video of where I get some of my files since you guys ask that a lot. But some files from DO3D actually come with magnet ports. Now it's good to read and don't be like me. As you can see, this says low level of pretty much attachment. You want to find something a lot better than this. This I kind of just went to Walmart. I was looking for some magnets to add to my Prey helmet that's coming up, and just grab these. Complete fail because one, they don't fit, and two, they're not the strongest attachment, but I'll figure out something to use those for. But with magnets, you can pretty much, if you have like a drill or anything, you can find out what drill bit goes with the magnet that you have, drill it out, put your magnet in with some of this handy dandy E600. No, I'm not sponsored. But that's pretty much how you can incorporate magnets. So if you don't use DO3D, if you don't use paid files, that's another way that you can get kind of creative and use magnets. My go-to is always going to be my soldering iron, because this thing is pretty much the same thing as 3D printing. It heats up the plastic, and then adheres the two together. You can use different things like rafts, which I've done in several different of my videos. I use a raft pretty much behind two pieces that have to connect, and then just use that as a reinforcer, and then pretty much heat those up behind it. One thing that I will mention, there are a lot of different soldering irons. Some of them don't come with this heat temperature gauge. I would say definitely get one that does, because you don't want to get one that's just going to heat up and then melt through your print. So definitely find one with a temperature gauge. That way you can find out and test on older prints or failed prints, like this Blade of Chaos that kind of failed. You'll see more on this soon. But I'll use something like this and pretty much take these two halves, put them together, and then just solder it, just to get some practice in, just to see my skills, just to see what temperature I should put everything on, just kind of getting the hang of things. I never throw out prints, because you can always use those to practice on painting, soldering, magnets, drilling, anything that you have creatively in your head. Try with something that you're not going to really care too much about. Weathering too. Older props are good with weathering. And finally, I've just become a fan of this two-sided tape. This is some Gorilla Glue's two-sided tape. This I don't really use as far as like attaching prints. This is just what I use pretty much to attach my LED lights. So in the flash helmet, you'll see a little bit of tape just because of a place where there's like a turn where I didn't really like do the best job of making that bend. So you don't want to have like stress points, but as you can see, everything is in there pretty solid. Basically what I do is just line the helmet with a two-sided tape. So in that case, where like the check marks and all everything was, I was gonna be transparent, I just put two-sided tape along that, and then came with the backside, so where you peel off that tape from the LED light, I just put that on there. And that thing, even if you have LED lights that you're putting just around the house, that stuff, this Gorilla Glue two-sided tape, is definitely gonna hold it, because the sticky adhesive that they put on behind LED lights, it's like, that does nothing. So definitely try some of this. This helps anything that you're trying to attach. The Mr. Beast helmet that I made as well, the eyebrow accents, how do you think those stuck? Stuff like this. So get creative. Pardon me, I'm parched. But as I pretty much take a sip of water and catch my breath again, check out this other tutorial showing you how I solder things. I won't show you glue, everything like that. You kind of get the point with that, but here's how you solder. Okay, so there are a couple different methods that you can use, or that I use when I'm soldering two different pieces together. One is basically what you're seeing here, where I put the raft or a raft in between the two gaps, just to fill the gap so that there's no big intrusive line, and then I'll add Bondo over that. But that's one method that I'll typically use. Again, if there's a big gap where I don't want to see a hole. Another method that I'll basically use is I'll put a raft, again, behind the two, so on the inside of the helmet, and I'll use that just to like reinforce the prop together instead of using glue or anything like that. Like I said, I don't really like glue. So I'll put it behind everything so that way it reinforces the two pieces together. And then finally, if there are no gaps, if everything just like seams together perfectly, I'll just put the soldering iron over the two parts like you see here, and then just make sure that those two connect and close up any gaps. Kind of touched on it just a minute ago, but failed prints is definitely something that you should have in your arsenal, for the same reason that I said earlier, because with these, you're able to test everything that you want to before actually putting it onto a final prop. So sometimes you might want to get a little creative and try something new. I know when I first started using graphite powder to get pretty much that metallic kind of finish, I didn't want to just go out and do it on that Taskmaster helmet and mess it up, because it took 2, maybe 2.5 days to print everything out, to see everything mess up. So to prevent that from happening, use a failed print. If you're trying to weather a prop, use a failed print and use the exact same colors that you want to on the final helmet, just to see if it actually looks the same way that you want it to, and make sure that it comes out right. Failed prints save your life, save your time. They save a lot, and they're good to learn from. Try to assess what happened during a print. That way you can figure out how to prevent that from happening again. Most of the time for me, it's just me being lazy. Like this one, I had to change my nozzle and re-level. Just didn't do it, and now I gotta fail. This is about 14-15 hours. I woke up to this, to spaghetti strings everywhere. It is what it is. But failed prints is definitely something that you want to use. You can try every single thing that I'm putting in this video, you can try on a failed print. I don't have a video of failed prints because as we come close to the end, finally some of the last kind of things that you want to have when you're painting. So just for an example, like I said, these chaos blades, you can see, focus, the details where I'm going to have the light coming through. So in that case, painter's tape doesn't come that thin. So painter's tape along with an X-Acto knife. This thing works wonders because you can get everything to where you need to and then use the blade to pretty much cut everything out. For a good example of that, check out this Flash video where I made the Flash's helmet. But this stuff saves your lives along with this stuff. Another method inside of the painter's tape, aside from the painter's tape, that you can use is a plastic bag. So if you don't want to use up a lot of painter's tape, if it's something that's huge, check out my Deathstroke helmet. Got a lot of tags that I'm going to be putting into this one. But my Deathstroke helmet, you'll see that I pretty much split it in half. So what I basically did was use some painter's tape and then put a plastic bag over everything, so that way I don't have to painter's tape the whole thing and waste a whole bunch of tape. We all have that one cabinet with a whole bunch of Walmart Stop and Shop bags, everything like that. So use a bit of painter's tape, just like I said, to get that initial line, which is what I did, and then use a plastic bag to cover everything else. It saves you time. Like I said, plastic bags, painter's tape, X-Acto knife to cover every detail that you want to. Save those details. If you're trying to make something transparent, this is where this is going to come into handy. Last but not least, a headstocking. This thing helps with a couple different things. Like when I'm trying to put my helmets on, I'll throw this on. If you're scanning your head, like in this video where I got a replica of my head to actually be able to make helmets fit, this comes into handy. Aside from that's kind of like explanatory, but aside from that, screen use images. The reason I'm able to get these things to look the way that they do is because I go on Google and I type in screen use prop, screen use image, Google. It's not really a tool, but your computer is a hardware, so it's kind of a tool. Along with this, it's the biggest tool you have. So that's kind of how I find out exact replicas or exact like paints, so on and so forth, to make everything match and look exactly how it's gonna look. So again, the stocking to help things fit and to help get scans, and screen use images to help you make things look exactly how they should. That way you have a reference, you could take it to the store, match up with the paint that you want to, kind of like what I did on my Daredevil helmet. Since I wanted it to look a different way, I took a screenshot, took it to the store, put some paints up to my phone, found something that was close enough, good enough, and then went from there. All right, so I hope that helped you guys out. Again, those are some beginner tools that you want to have, just some basic things. Like I said, replacing some of these things is going to be a little costly. Having some of these things are going to save your lives, and some of these things are just going to happen. So I hope this video helped you guys out. If this video definitely did help you out, then definitely hit that like button to help me out through the algorithm and to help it reach other people who might be looking for the same thing. Definitely hit the share button for the same exact reason. and then definitely hit that subscribe button. If you're somebody who's a 3D printing enthusiast, if you're somebody who's into cosplays, or if you're somebody into DIY tutorial builds, this is definitely the channel for you. Now you should be able to navigate your way through this journey on finishing 3D printed props. Now, if it's not the prints that are giving you a big hard, not much of a struggle, maybe it's the printer itself that's giving you a bit of trouble. Definitely stay tuned and check out this next video to help you out with 3D printer maintenance. What are some of the tools that come with your printer? How do you change certain things? How do you level your bed? That's a big one. Definitely check out this next video. Besides that, it's BC Comics. Peace.